Hi, this is Pat Moorhead with Moor Insights Strategy, and we are here for another data center podcast. Great to see you, Matt, Will, and Paul. You're looking chippery. Yeah. Some of us are packing our bags for Mobile World Congress, but it's Friday, and I love doing the podcast every other week. Let us know out there if you want us to do it every week. I don't know. Pretty big, not really a huge time commitment, but it's always get out there. How are you guys doing?
Good. I'm just getting ready for MWC too, Pat. We were just talking about that. So I'm on a jet plane at 6 p.m. out of Dallas to Barcelona.
Man, I really appreciate you. By the way, Anshul does that the best. I don't know. You ever heard him? Barcelona?
So, he does.
So, Matt, you're in a different place every time I see you on a camera. Where are you today?
I'm in the Boston area, so my oldest son is looking at ways to extend his financial dependency on me in grad school. So I'm sitting in a hotel room in the Boston area. And likely be somewhere else the week after that or the next podcast as well. So.
And you are a traveling man, Paul. Paul, are you in Russia, China?
No, I'm here in City Park.
You look so distinguished. I feel insecure when I see you. You're like the stately participant.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there has been a rumor that you watch these shows and they talk about an AT&T salesperson, right, who flies to Cambodia, was once fluent in Russian and had a 50-foot antenna in his backyard for shortwave radio. I mean, I'm not saying anything, but that's kind of Paul Smith Goodson I hear. I've heard
like Maxwell Smart from Get Smart.
Yeah.
I don't know, Paul. You don't have to. Don't feel like you've got to confirm or deny. We don't want to get you on any special list either. So, anyways, kind of leave it here. But hey, if it's your first time to the Data Center Podcast, we talk about data center stuff. We talk about the hardware, the software, services, compute, storage, networking, operations, data management, AI, quantum, and more. Paul is the creative embodiment of this show. He typically has the more interesting things to talk about. That's all interesting. Scratch that.
I think it's interesting headlines.
Let's get that scrubbed. But hey, we are talking ARM Neoverse, next generation. We're talking about Photon-Ion Cocktails. Pretty apropos. It's on a Friday. We're talking cocktails. Observability. Boy, observability is cool. Data is cool. Imagine that from Cisco's second quarter earnings. Talking about Intel Foundry, big event that they had with a lot of folks that couldn't make it. I wanted to make it, but I did tune in for the video. Google is coming out with more models, and this time open. I don't know how you can be a company and say it's got an open source model, but hey, Google does, and it's called Gemma, not Gamma or Grandma, but Gemma. Fortinet, we're talking a little bit of earnings here for Fortinet and for NVIDIA. Just a reminder, we're not equity analysts. We're tech industry analysts. So don't take anything we say as investment advice. In fact, you might want to do the opposite of anything we might infer about that. I do no direct tech trades for what it's worth. That's probably a reason I'm still working right now. But anyways, let's move on. Matt, you are first on base. Neoverse, gosh, ARM is, 10 or 20% after being zero about 10 years ago. Yep. And they are just on a rapid incline in the data center.
They are. Speaking of first base, spring training kicked off in the last few days for the MLB. So all you Red Sox fans, be excited until about July when they fall out of the playoff race.
Go Astros.
Oh, yeah. We don't want to talk about the Astros. Anyway, ARM. So, what was it, Pat? Back in 2018 or so, 2019 when they announced, I think 2018 when they announced Neoverse, and they actually launched it in 2019. So Neoverse, for those that are listening for the first time, and I'll get through this very quickly, Neoverse is it's a portfolio and a platform that enables folks that design silicon for servers, for data centers, for networking, to have that server, that infrastructure level IP. So higher performant, more reliable, so on and so forth. V1 launched in 2018, and 2019, a lot of folks thought ARM was crazy because they're the mobile phone folks. Fast forward 4 years, and they're, what Pat said, 10 to 20% of the cloud infrastructure market share right now, and they're growing fast. And so this past week, by the way, they had a very strong earnings call. This past week, third generation of Neoverse portfolio launches, IP launches under their compute subsystem, and we'll get to that in a second. The highlights of it, the two big parts, V3, which is the highest performing platform. Think of that as like the really performant CPU architecture. That launches with I think it's a 50% increase in performance per socket relative to V2, or the second generation of a platform, and I'll get to that. And then N3, which is kind of their price performance per watt kind of play for general purpose servers, let's say, demonstrated a 20% performance per watt improvement over second generation of N2. So there's a couple of things in there I want to tease out because it's important. When I talk about a 50% improvement, ARM has this thing called CSS, Compute Subsystem. It allows folks like Microsoft, AWS, GCP, those that design silicon, it allows them to quickly design, deploy, and get to production with silicon. It does a lot of the underlying upfront work that would take engineers a whole lot of time to get done, so that you can deliver, new silicon in months instead of years. So that's called CSS, okay? That's an important thing because as ARM compared their V series, this generation versus, kind of improvements, they were comparing it against their old general purpose server portfolio. So that 50%, it's still very impressive, but it's not necessarily a like-for-like comparison. Not a big deal, but it's important to call that out. The big deal is that they are enabling these portfolios for quick design. They're continuing that, and the emphasis of the company has been on CSS. It's been on, hey, don't get caught up in the weeds. Don't task your engineers with a lot of that upfront low-level work. Let us get you to 50% or 60%, and you do the remaining 40% of the work to get to production and get to value faster. Really great story. I'm really curious, Pat, on your perspective on this, but also on, given the improvement on the V in the announcement from AWS around doing a 2-socket part, what you think the real potential of this is down the line.
Yeah, so first off, their performance in the last 3 years is nothing but impressive.
Yeah.
In how they've aligned. And while the company doesn't talk a lot about what's going on in China, ARM servers, again, my data is not good, but the data that is out there suggests 30 to 40% of the servers that are shipping are ARM based. So it's pretty staggering. And it's one thing to show up and have one of the major CSPs come out with something, and it's another to have all four. And again, Google isn't public, but I put a 98% chance that they're going to show up with an ARM-based SoC out there. You've got the four amigos, and the fourth is OCI with Ampere. You got something going on, and it's one thing to get the I'll call the underlying hardware, the dev tools in place, and when AWS flipped a bit, it just became a self-fulfilling prophecy that this would be the case. And it's almost like what's next for ARM. I think the dual socket thing was important. Now we haven't seen all the details on that from AWS, but it does certainly bring them into the scale up crowd, which I think might be able to help them in the on-prem data center.
That's right.
Or the colo data center with SAP, Oracle databases, and stuff like that.
You know what I think is interesting on that, Pat? When we talk about, somewhere between 10 and 20%, of the cloud market share, that is solely on single socket. It's important, right? Because it's 10 to 20% of total market share based on only addressing that scale out kind of workload. They haven't touched any of that. That doesn't include any of that 2 socket market share. That makes that number that much more impressive.
That totally does. Yeah. But I think, again, it's up to AMD and Intel to show that, they can holistically pull together a design that is TCO positive for these companies, because these companies are investing a ton of money to develop these chips, a lot less. I think doing Opteron was about $1.2 billion. And a leading edge SoC pulling in ARM IP will cost you about $100 million. So the economics have dramatically shifted over 20 years.
Yeah. It's going to be fun to watch.
Totally. Hey, let's jump into the next topic. And it has a cool heading, and therefore it must be Paul's. Yeah. That's a Photon-Ion Cocktail. I thought the two were different, Paul. First of all, what's a photon and what's an ion, and how do you put a cocktail together? And do you have to go to school to be a mixologist?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I didn't have room to put on the rocks. This is something for IonQ. IonQ is a quantum company. Their technology is trapped ion. And the 2 important areas of research and development for IonQ are scaling up their qubits and networking these ion traps together using photonics. Their overall architecture, objective for overall architecture, is something called the reconfigurable multi-core quantum architecture, like RMCA. They're well along on that. They just announced one of the major milestones going forward in this architecture, and that's the capability to entangle an ion with a photon. And it's first commercial demonstration of that capability. It's been done before, but it's been done in an academic environment. In this case, what happens is you've got a single photon that entangles with a qubit, and that forms what they call a network node. And to be worthwhile, that node must be able to have the capability to send that interconnected photons through fiber optics to a hub, and then that hub's going to take that photon and look at it and manipulate it and measure the state to make sure that there was actually an entanglement that could happen. So anyway, that's the first milestone, is being able to entangle these 2. The next milestone is taking 2 of these ion-based qubits from separate nodes and then using their entangled qubits. So it gets a little bit more complicated. And then that entangled, that photon will be then sent on to be analyzed, and then it'll be interconnected to computational qubits for actually doing the computation. So anyway, that's a pretty important role in what their overall architecture is. They been part of photonics, been part of their roadmap for quite a while. They acquired a company, I think last year, a couple of years ago, called Entangled Networks, and the intent was, of course, to acquire that technology to be able to connect distributed quantum processing together.
Paul, what is this? Does this get us to more qubits, or is this about the quality of those qubits, or is it scale?
It's actually both. It enables them to basically scale up. They've got the quantum processing units. They've got the qubits in it, and they're all pretty high fidelity qubits and everything. So it allows them to scale upwards to achieve the scaling objectives. So.
This is amazing. Just think about it. 5 years from now, we're gonna get on this show, Paul, and you're gonna be talking about end users running applications that are infused by. This might be the one that I'm just completely wrong on, and I don't claim to get them all right, but I don't buy into the. We are going to see commercial value within 5 years. I keep using that 5 years, and we'll see. But of course, if I'm wrong, I'll never bring it up. But if I'm right, I'll bring it up. Like
you'll do your victory lap. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Got to do the victory lap as an analyst. But
it's like the Readbird sensors that we were talking about. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, it was all theory, and now it's a commercial product. So.
Yeah, totally.
So we're going to see the same thing, and it's going to be similar to what AI is doing in terms of driving the technology.
Yep, I love it. Now let's move from chips and quantum to observability, and observability has just become a rapidly important thing as we have disaggregated not only the infrastructure but also the applications. So, and Cisco, right, known as the core network company with a lot of good edge, is really making some big bets on cross-cloud services.
Yeah. Yeah, Q2 earnings came out. There was, some softness in sales, Pat. I know you weighed in on this. Networking was down 12%. And service provider revenue was down as well. I guess some were concerned about the growth of security. Cisco has this reinvigorated focus on security with Security Cloud, and I've spent a lot of time with the team there. But they only saw 3% growth year over year. And that is quite lower than the market rate. So there's concerns about that. But as I sort of waded through that, and of course, there was also the announcement of a small reduction in force. Maria Martinez's departure. She was the chief operations officer. She has left as well. So I think that created a lot of, ambiguity and, in the markets, and the stock was somewhat down. But I do see observability as a bright spot. The company did grow that 16% year over year. Now, the revenue contribution is quite slow. It rang in just under 200 million. But when you think about Splunk and the likelihood of that being approved and what that brings to Cisco with that $28 billion transaction, I do think when you look at Q2, observability was definitely a bright spot and something that, to be bullish about as Cisco really leans into, all of these prior acquisitions with AppD and with Valsize and Accedian and others. I mean, they're really creating some net new value for their customers.
Yeah, it's there were a lot of bad takes on the Cisco earnings. I have to admit. Now, I've always thought that we were smarter than the equity Wall Street guys, but that's just throwing shade. The thing about it is we just look at different things, right? Mm-hmm. As industry analysts, we're looking more at market and product fit, roadmap and longevity, and not necessarily thrilled with, oh my gosh, you had layoffs, stock goes up, this is great, we're loving this layoff thing, or showing up. And again, I actually have a finance degree, so maybe I know this stuff, but essentially the theory of the valuation of a company is the accumulation of net cash over an infinite period of time, right? And so I guess we're looking at the same thing, but maybe not. I like their network as a service. I like their security as a service. I like observability as a service, and everything they do where you can make money regardless of where that switch is sitting,
Mm-hmm.
is good for Cisco. And quite frankly, they've got a monopoly position. By the way, it's not illegal to be a monopoly, but if you have over 50% share in the data center network switch market, Cisco has over 50% market share. I mean, do we know a company that doesn't have a Cisco core switch?
Right.
I mean, sure, there's top of rack switches, there's spine and leaf, and all this stuff, but your core switch, more likely than not, is going to be Cisco.
Yeah.
So it's a good play.
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of bullish on Cisco as, kind of, you move away from, not away from, but you kind of look at the world in a bigger picture, right? Where it's not just about routers, switches, it's not just about servers, it's not just about kind of discrete, it's about a connected world.
Mm-hmm.
I think their observability play really is the future there. I mean, when you think about, and we're just having this discussion yesterday around AI ops and the ability to, root cause and be proactive in managing your environments from the silicon all the way up through the apps and the data. Cisco has all of those ingredients. I mean, there's a really interesting play 5 years from now. And I think Cisco is set up to be on the leading side of that. And I don't think 5 years from now, we're going to talk about them as a networking company. I really don't. I mean, it is much bigger than that. In my mind.
I think it's just, it's really compelling that they're taking these acquired companies, putting them together and creating net new value for customers, like with business de-risk efforts and that sort of thing. So they're just not allowing the cash register to ring on, the traditional stuff that App Dynamics and Thousand Eyes deliver. So that for me, that 1 + 1 = 3 is super compelling.
Yeah. Hey, I was on a podcast with Daniel Newman this morning, and we were talking about, actually, I got this question on CNBC. I was literally on CNBC for 30 minutes talking NVIDIA, but they were asking, John Ford asked me, hey, have you ever seen anything like this before? I'm like, yeah, Cisco, .com 1.0. Cisco was the NVIDIA of .com 1.0, if you remember. They were the most valuable tech company on the planet. Pretty wild.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's move to the next topic, and that is Intel Foundry, the new name of Intel Foundry Services. And they had a very big event with some, actually didn't think they were going to announce a customer, but they did.
Yeah, I know, right? So this is, you have to admire Intel and Pat Gelsinger in particular. I mean, so you can look at their stock, you can look at their portfolio and say, well, they were behind, their competitor here or there, and you can point out faults. But when he came in to right the ship, he took this 5 nodes and 4-year approach, which is unheard of, as part one of kind of how we wanted to turn the company around. And part two, it was, we're going to re-enter the Foundry game. And I think a lot of people were skeptical when he talked about it. When he made this announcement. And I don't know what, Pat, is it a year and a half later, a year later, they have this event where, lo and behold, Intel Foundry, I don't know what you would call it, what the event is. It
it was called Connect or Direct Connect or something.
Yeah, loads of announcements coming out, right? But they're not just in the Foundry business, they're in the Foundry business, and they're going to be filling those coffers. He's got a goal to be, I think he said something like 50% of the output of silicon in the next few years, which seems incredibly bullish. But they signed an agreement with Microsoft. He has the CEO Rene of ARM up on stage talking with him. He's talking about building chips for NVIDIA and AMD. He is, two things about this I really appreciate. One, he's separating Foundry from silicon design, right? He understands that, one feeds the other, but he also understands that he needs to fill these manufacturing floors with customers beyond Intel, and he's trying to create that separation so that he can be a player here in the U.S. That's part one. Part two is he's taking a very, very aggressive approach, and it's interesting. It's like they've gone from this, Intel for Intel and only Intel to a very open kind of approach and embracing, everybody out there, understanding that it's good for the industry in general. So super impressed. Also announced 14A, which I'm sure you're going to have some opinions on. But he is definitely getting out there further and further on the Foundry side as that 5 nodes in 4 years vision is being realized as well. So, bully to him, bully to Intel. The company is definitely back, and I would caution folks not to just look at some benchmarking to measure where they are competitively. He's making moves that is going to have an impact on the business as a whole, not just kind of bringing in money on one side.
If talking about victory laps,
Yep.
3 years ago, about a month after Pat Gelsinger came back into the company, I interviewed the guy, and they were going to make some big announcements. This IDM 2.0, which talked about Foundry service. You remember the belief was that Intel was going to sell all their fabs off.
That's right.
And it was just going to be a design company. I'm like, well, that's dumb. That would basically put the company out of business. We saw what happened when AMD separated itself from Global Foundries, and what a nightmare that ended up being. You have to put like 5 to 7 years of work in place to get even on standard development tools.
Yeah.
Because by Synopsys and Cadence. But in my article, I didn't Babe Ruth it. Okay. I said, here's what the company needs to do to get back on track. Sapphire Rapids was 2 years late. Intel 7 nanometer, I think, was 4 years late.
That's right.
And they went from having a year and a half lead to being behind TSMC by like 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, wait, how are you going to do this again?
Yeah.
And Gelsinger says, yeah, we're going to take our manufacturing and technology and we're going to offer it to everybody. And everybody's like, we don't want your stuff, right? You guys have fallen off the wagon. But anyways, 5 nodes in 4 years. I think they've accomplished 4 in 3, I think, so far.
5 is coming. Yeah.
And then you've got the political instability factor of, do you really want all your eggs in one basket? Yeah. I believe that NVIDIA will be a packaging customer, and not just because TSMC doesn't have enough CoWoS capability, but because the combination of EMIB plus Foveros is good, right? And by the way, it's also not a stretch. NVIDIA has to run through Intel on the RAMP-C defense contract anyways.
Yeah.
I guess the big question is wafers. They've got the number 3 mobile processor company, MediaTek, that is signed up. And I believe as soon as Intel shows its capabilities, we're going to pull at China and say, hey, anything that's critical infrastructure, not just defense, but finance, universities, telecommunications, the wafers all have to be done here in the U.S. And that's going to force Apple and Qualcomm to get on board. That's a thesis. We'll see if I'm right. If I'm wrong, we won't talk about it. But,
what about the whole notion of Intel building stuff for AMD? It's like cats and dogs living together, like the line from Ghostbusters.
I mean, my advice to AMD and the Lisa Su team is put any animosity aside and go in there and figure this thing out.
Yeah.
Do the math if it's beneficial. I mean,
right.
And it's not free to do a separate mask set. It doesn't take twice as much work and twice as many engineers on an overall program to do a leading edge mask set. And you might have to spend $20-25 million to do that just to get the mask set going. But each process a little bit unique. Paul, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say Intel spun off Programmable Solutions last year.
That's right.
And
Yeah, they actually announced it. Yeah.
And down the road, what do you think about them spinning off the Foundry?
Yeah, I could see them first setting up as a tracking stock, kind of like they did like they're doing with programmable solutions, and then what they did with Mobileye.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the ARM SoftBank. You own 90%. Is it really a separate company? I don't know. I'm not an equity guy, but I do think they would have a lot more value creation. But it's got to be value creation. Final thing, because we've got 4 topics to chew through in 17 minutes here.
I'll be fast.
No. Yeah, and these are earnings. Hopefully, will be easier, but they need to be truly fully autonomous before you can break the umbilical cord. Otherwise the baby dies. So that's not a happy time. Hey, let's move to the next topic. Google does Gemma, not Gamma or Grandma. I mean, does the world actually need another model?
Oh man.
Yeah, they said that.
This is live, right?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, Paul.
They said that Gemma is a Latin name for a precious stone. So there you go.
It's got to be good then. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, Google came up with these lightweight, state-of-the-art open models, and it's the same technology and research that came out of Gemini. So it'll be interesting. It was developed by DeepMind and some other teams within Google. So it's an open model. It's a new platform, and so I think it's a good deal. Comes in 2 sizes, a 2B and 7B, and each one of these models have got they're pre-trained with instruction tuned variants and things like that. They've got the tool chains for almost everything. They can also, the nice thing is they can run on laptops, on the cloud, or deployment on Vertex AI or Kubernetes engine or anything. So it's really good. And according to the benchmarking, they're the best in class for their sizes and compared to other open models. So I think it's a good thing.
Have you read the white paper yet, by chance?
No, I haven't. No, I've got it on my my laptop, but I haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
Yeah, I'd be interested to once you go through that. I think you're the only one on the team that can actually read a large language model white paper. Well, the IBM one was actually put in a way that even people like me could understand it. Which I appreciated, but I'd be interested to see. By the way, I certainly hope the results are better than their Gemini image results.
Yeah.
Which
we
probably don't need to drag that through here.
No.
But I think they've shut down that service temporarily as they fix out the bugs.
Yeah.
But since this is based on Gemini, I haven't heard anything about it being shut down for, I don't know if it can do images or not. So
yeah, good stuff. Hey, let's move to some earnings action here.
Yeah.
Fortinet. So Will, maybe remind everybody what Fortinet is and tell us how they did.
Yeah, so Fortinet is a security company, and what's really interesting, we're seeing this as networking and security converge. We're seeing traditional network companies like Cisco double down on security, but we're seeing sort of the opposite effect with a lot of these security companies like Fortinet, Palo Alto Networks that are getting into networking. And Fortinet announced 4Q earnings, and I've spent time with the team. I'm, like you so eloquently mentioned, we're not financial, sell side, buy side analysts, but we like to play them on TV. As I looked at their revenue and their performance, I had no idea. I mean, their top line revenue is close to $6 billion, and that's dollars.
Strong.
not pesos, and that's strong. And it's strong when you consider the founders are actually Chinese, and this has been, used by some of Fortinet's competitors to sort of, target the company, which is silly because the company has demonstrated a solid track record. They have a lot of business, I'm sure, within the government municipality areas, but $6 billion in top line revenue, a very strong portfolio when you look at SASE and SD-WAN and the convergence of security and networking. And the other thing I really like about Fortinet is that they have focused their efforts on custom silicon in some of their products, as well as FortiOS, which is an operating system that basically delivers a consistent policy across its entire portfolio of firewalls, appliances, and whatnot. I think that single policy construct has been a key success point, for the company's efforts here. But it was surprising to me to learn that the company is pretty close to $6 billion in top line revenue. I mean, I don't know if you knew that, Pat, but it's pretty.
Why don't people talk about the company more?
Well, I think, Palo Alto has been getting a lot of limelight, recently. I mean, I think a lot of the financial analysts have been very bullish on its financials and its success. And as Palo Alto Networks is pushing into, IoT security and going vertical in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to call Fortinet, the best kept secret, but I think you're going to hear more about the company as time goes on.
The best kept $6 billion secret.
$6 billion secret.
Gosh, I think the company needs to invest in more market education with industry analysts.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because actually I've been working with Fortinet on a research brief, and that should be posted in the next couple of weeks. So thank you for setting me up for that.
I love it.
Gratuitous plug, Pat.
And what's a paper without a video? So
there should be a video there too.
Okay, I'll stop it.
I was impressed by Fortinet bought back $1.5 billion worth of stock.
Oh, wow.
Right, baby. And there's nothing like when you do that saying, I don't have a better investment to make. And God forbid in this regulatory state we're in, it's like fraught with, risk.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's move into this here. NVIDIA, my God, what is going on? This is ridiculous. By the way, I spent 30 minutes on CNBC pre-earnings going in and out. They brought me back 4 times, but it was like real-time coverage. CNBC had a ticker, like a Christmas, days till Christmas, that they would show.
Yeah, it's crazy. By the way, well, I'll take your $6 billion and raise you 40-something billion. Holy heck. Yeah, Pat, it's it's big when like the mainstream news outlets are reporting on it. You have these like big outlets, CNN, Fox, and everybody else talking about NVIDIA. What the heck, right? What is silicon? So just to set context, their market cap increased by $255 billion in one day.
No. They literally went up in AMD since earnings.
Yes, or 277. Yeah, they went up in AMD. That's a good way of putting it. So total revenue for the quarter was strong, of course, at $22 billion. That's a meager 265% increase year over year in quarterly revenue. Yeah, I know, right? Thank God for data center business pulling its weight at 409% year over year growth, coming in at $18 billion in revenue. I don't have a whole lot to say except for holy heck. This is incredible. We kind of knew something was going to be big, right? When you saw the AMD earnings and how strong they were with the MI300, you kind of knew it was going to be big. But this big, full year revenue, $47.5 billion. And equally important are some of the announcements they've made in the last quarter. When you look at Nemo AI, is it Nemo AI? Nemo AI, yeah, which is gives easier access into models. They've done things in the medical field. They signed the agreement with AWS. They have a big partnership with Cisco. It is just like nonstop. The question is it peaked? Is it going to peak anytime soon? How much does an AMD come in and kind of backfill, or not even backfill because they have a strong product offering, but where does this go? I mean, this cannot continue at this pace.
Can't be sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the big question that I got throughout the week is how long can this go? And on a percentage basis, they're going to lose percentage market share. But if your market is growing from 100 billion to 400 billion, and I kind of buy into the AMD market TAM number, NVIDIA can still grow $200 billion and lose percentage market share. So who cares, right? And then there's this talk about NVIDIA potentially getting into the custom ASIC market, right? Which, like we talked about, at least the three horsemen have already created their own ASICs out there. There's a trade-off between ASICs and GPUs for programmability, but if you're NVIDIA, you're totally going to throw CUDA, not just the programmability, but the CUDA frameworks and the CUDA models against it for ease of transition. I mean, every time I think that the big companies can't get bigger, the big companies keep getting bigger. And if you look historically, the big companies either tripped a little on their own, or they tripped either by self-inflicted wounds or not getting on the boat of the next new thing.
Yeah.
Or they were broken up by the federal government when it came to companies like AT&T. I've never seen, this is unprecedented. I think it goes, I think there was I'm trying to think of the tobacco and trade company back in the 1770s. I think they said would have been the largest company and would have been worth like $2 trillion in today's. But seriously, just when you think the big companies can't get bigger, they keep getting bigger.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I think it leads us into a great final topic here, which is the AI Alliance, which essentially is very pro-competition to try to level the playing field for smaller companies to be able to innovate, and for the big companies not to, which correspondingly could mean the big companies not having a monopoly control over it.
Yeah.
So, Paul, you're up, buddy.
We talked about AI Alliance in January, but they had 50 members at that time, and they've got acquired about a little over 30 new members recently, and they established a couple of new working groups, which is the first one. But the Alliance's aim is really to promote responsible and ethical AI all over the world. They're focusing in on collaboration, governance, testing, policy, education, looking at hardware ecosystems. So, I mean, it's good for the little little companies and the big companies too. The two working groups that they put out, one is the AI Safety and Trust Tooling Work Group. It's going to focus on AI safety, ethics, cybersecurity, and it's going to be responsible for things like creating the tools and the resources and the white papers and things like that. The next one is the AI Policy Work Group, and they're responsible for engaging public forums and bringing in experts and policymakers to talk about innovation and barriers and opportunities. So I think as a whole, you're going to have a big influence on policy and regulations. The ones not involved in this are Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, I don't know if it's real, AWS, I think, but they're not involved in it. But I think the market and regulations are going to be heavily influenced by the AI Alliance. It was originally formed by IBM and Meta.
Mhm.
Can you, so there was the two companies that started were IBM and Meta, right?
Yeah.
And it's so interesting when I look at Meta and what they've done to level the playing field for the industry. The first thing was OCP, the Open Compute Project.
Right.
Before Meta was gigantic, they were trying to figure out, hey, how do I deal with the advantage that Google and Microsoft would have from scale? So what they did is they came and they helped create industry standards for hyperscaler infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And these were compute, storage, memory layouts, and I'm sure I'm missing something, Matt. I think even cooling, down to the placement, of the boards, and then the super micros, and even at the time the Dell and HP when it started would actually have OCP compliant infrastructure as well. And Meta doesn't need to do that anymore because they're freaking gigantic at this point. But there still is an OCP, Open Compute Project, and it continues to this day. It doesn't get as much fanfare as it used to.
It's still huge, though. I mean, God love Frank Frankowski, who started it. It still influences the OEMs. It's incredible. I don't think about that.
Yeah, and then you got into PyTorch, which was again another Google TensorFlow. Looked like it was going to run away with it and become the standard for machine learning. And Meta was like, I don't think so. Here's PyTorch, and created that as an alternative standard that you essentially have to support some way or another. And I'm missing another standard they created. You guys remember?
OCP,
PyTorch.
Something in the AR/VR space.
Anyways, I don't get them all right, but I remember thinking they had created three things. So guys, we made it. It is 11:30 Central. We have not been unplugged by a solar flare, AT&T, or Verizon. I can't believe we went with this whole show, Will. I do. At some point, I want to ask you what the heck happened, but we've run out of time today. But how can every one of the carriers go down at the same time? Like, I just don't get it.
I mean, in Bastrop, I'm on T-Mobile 5G fixed wireless access. I didn't experience any blip, but yeah, I mean, just real quickly, AT&T issued a State Department response. Not a lot of detail. The rumor was it was a peering issue with handoffs. I mean, if I were to guess, and I didn't get briefed by AT&T, there was probably some sort of software release that just created a hiccup.
But what is it with mobile? Like, shouldn't I be able to call AT&T to AT&T and it work?
It should. Yeah.
No, but there was zero connectivity. Not just I can't make a call. It was I have SOS.
You had SOS on your phone. Yeah, it was funny. I had a painter contractor in my house, and it's like, "Do you have SOS?" And English was not his first language, but it's like, "Do you have AT&T?" It's like, "Yeah." So, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how things kind of fall out. There was discussion around could have this been a cyber attack, but it doesn't appear, at least based on some of the investigations that I've conducted, that was the case as well for denial of service. And we've seen other operators certainly be hacked, and we won't mention their names, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was several hours of outage.
Bring back landline. Bring it back. Bring back dial tone. I want my 56K.
Hey, listen, ham radio is the only answer.
That is.
And
But I hear though, if you have a submarine, you need ultra very low. It's back there.
Yeah, it doesn't go very far either.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Hey, great to see all of you. Have a great weekend. Hopefully you like the show. All complaints to Matt, Will, and Paul. All the kudos to me, as usual. And if you do fax us something, it just goes instantly into the shred bin. So all you lawyers out here trying to serve me documents, I'm never in the same place at the same time. So don't even try. And if you crash your bicycle and I come to help you and you think you're going to like hand me the paper, like in my jacket, good luck. Because if I see somebody I've seen this in a movie, I'm just going to walk, I'm going to step over you and get out of your way. So anyways, I know kind of a weird ending, but getting into the brain of us is sometimes a scary thing. Thanks, everybody.